35 years ago, you can have a paralegal, you can have an associate, you can have ideally you'd have a psychologist or a jury consultant by your side. 35 years ago, I had a young psychologist who had an interest in being a lawyer. And I went, I said, well, come pick a jury with me. So we went over to pick a jury, and she gave me feedback on this one person. We came down to two people. We used our strikes. We got one left. We got two people. And I had this one woman I wanted to strike. And she told me, she said, no, I don't agree with you. I think she likes you. She likes your client. I think you're better off to leave her on the panel. I wasn't so sure. I didn't think that she responded well to me. She said, no, I have to disagree with you. So I deferred to her, and I kept the woman on my panel. Obviously, I won the case, or I wouldn't be talking about it. But it turned out that woman was a very strong juror in my favor. And that young psychologist, what was her name? Lisa Blue. Don't know whatever happened to her. But having someone like that by your side is just extremely important to help you look for these leadership qualities and help you look for these nonverbal responses to you. Now, the other thing you can do is you watch the group dynamics. Watch the jurors during the break. During all the breaks you take during a week or two or three of trial, and see who congregates together. You'll find that they'll start moving into groups of 3 or 4. And then in those groups of 3 or 4, who's the person who's always doing the talking while the others are the ones that are listening? You'll see leadership qualities. You'll see physical, nonverbal communication indicating leadership and followers. And so you can do analysis like that. So what do you care? They're already on your panel. Here's why you care. Because it's very important that you identify as closely as possible with your leaders. And I call those the folks that are going to actually be the leaders in the jury room. I call them juror advocates, because these are the people who are going to be advocating their position very strongly in the jury room. These are the people who are going to take the leadership role in moving that from 7-5 to 10-2. Those are your juror advocates. So what you want to do is make sure that those juror advocates are your juror advocates. And so you want to know who they are. So you're watching the jurors. You're not doing it, but you've got people watching the jurors during the breaks, during lunch, seeing who's together, who's leading. And then you find ways, you go back and look, if you've got an individual who you feel is going to be your leader, then you go back and look at their demographics. Back to the case, for example, with the master sergeant. I had the master sergeant on the jury. My case involved a paraplegic. And I looked at the demographics on this, and I remembered when we questioned on voir dire. And it was obvious the proudest moment of his life, in his 30 years in the military, the proudest moment in his life was that he had bowled 300. He had bowled 300 in competition, and his 300 won the entire tournament for his team. And he was so proud of that. So what do you do with that? Well, you can key your analogies, you can key your metaphors to that person. You can give your arguments to that person. You can arm that person with the arguments that you want them to make in the jury room. So, for example, I had a paraplegic case, and I'll tell you, I learned more about paraplegia. I went out, this guy was a very close personal friend. So, before his deposition, I went out and spent a weekend with him. He lived in a trailer. And I spent a weekend with him in a trailer. And I experienced what it was like to be a paraplegic. Now, I had probably tried 3 or 4 paraplegia cases before that, and I felt like I should go back and confess malpractice because I had tried paraplegia cases without understanding paraplegia. But when I went out and spent the weekend, I spent from Friday through Monday morning with him, and I watched the difficulty that a paraplegic has in a simple task like like getting out of bed and making a cup of coffee. When you're down here and the cups are up here and the coffee, just the problems of making a cup of coffee. So when I argued that case, I looked at the master sergeant, who I felt was going to be our leader. I said, you know, the most fundamental task for us, something as simple as making a cup of coffee in the morning, is like trying to pick up a 7-10 split in bowling for, you know, and he gives us, a visible nod. Okay, he identifies with knowing what a 7-10, knowing how difficult a 7-10 split is. But that's an analogy, a metaphor that goes directly to him. And then the other thing you want to do is you want to arm your juror advocates. If you want to influence decision making, you want to arm your juror advocates with the argument that you want them to make in the jury room in your behalf. And the way you do that is when you have 12 people in a jury room and everybody wants to talk, aside from the foreman, who has a built-in advantage, who is the person that gets the advantage in the jury room? It's the person who can say, wait a minute, look at this. It's the person who holds up the exhibit and has something to show, as opposed to just their voice. Wait a minute, look at this. Exhibit so-and-so. So what you do is you arm your juror advocate with the exhibit that you want them to use. So we always have the outcome determinative exhibit. And if we can, we submit special issues in Texas. So special issue number 5 might be the outcome determinative causation issue. So we'll carefully, ahead of time, we'll mark our exhibit as plaintiff's exhibit 5. So when we get to that point in the argument, you tell the juror, you look directly, you've got your 2 leaders, the people you think are going to be your 2 leaders in the jury room. Say, now when you consider issue number 5, causation, remember plaintiff's exhibit 5, and remember that, and then you give them the argument that goes along with plaintiff's exhibit 5, and you're telling them, okay, Robin, what I want you to do now is when we get to this, I want you to pick up plaintiff's exhibit 5, and Tommy, I want you to help her, the 2 of you make this argument. This is your argument on plaintiff's exhibit 5. It works. I've had people come out and say, you know, I argued it just the way you told me. But then they want part of the contingent fee. It gets a little messy.